Hello, and welcome to the Gamer Librarian Podcast. I am your host, Adrian. Today, we will be discussing The Walking Dead Tabletop RPG Kickstarter, The Last of Us Season 1, and more. Thank you for joining. Off the bat, let's talk about The Last of Us TV show. Now, when I first played the first video game of The Last of Us, I had a lot of fun with it. I didn't really think the gameplay was all that intuitive. I played a few more games that had things a little better with their crafting and stealth. But I think that journey as Joel and meeting Ellie and going across from Boston to where they ended up in the hospital, that was a truly great experience. And starting that again from start to finish with the show, it made me love the series even more. I think the show is absolute peak 10 out of 10 video game adaptation. The show even adds in a few new and different scenes to scenes that we've seen in the game, which I think elevate it entirely. It offers totally new surprises and a completely different understanding to the world of The Last of Us. The performances behind some of these characters are truly great. Even if you've already seen them, it's so nice to see it in such a new and a fresh take. Live action was the way to go for this. I would have maybe preferred to do it in animated. They probably could have gone away with a little more stuff if they went the more animated style, but live action was absolutely the way to go. The entire show looks like the game. Everything looks dirty and completely decrepit and forgotten, not to mention just the infected makeup of the clickers. The clickers looked gorgeous. Every single one of them that we saw for the few times that we did, they all looked really horrendous and morphed, especially the bloaters. One time we saw him, that was absolutely amazing. Now, I didn't like everything about it. I still don't think that 10 out of 10 is fully perfect. There are some caveats that I myself would have probably changed. I would have offered to have a few more clickers. It felt like the world itself was pretty barren, save for a lot of the humans that you see. I just wanted to see a little more of the clickers. Some more of that kind of action would have been nice. You kind of don't see them after maybe episode 5 or so, after a big climax, but that's pretty much fine. For me, the best part about the show, absolute favorite part, is episode 3, where they take a collectible from the game and make it into basically its own episode. That's probably the most changed thing about the show is if you play the game, you go into a certain town and you meet a character and you do some stuff in a school and then you go on your merry way. But that entire scene is completely scrapped and gone, and instead it takes a collectible that you could find in that area about a man finding somebody and kind of having a relationship with them, and that person leaving for some reason. And they take that and make that into the episode of itself, where the NPC that you meet in the game has an episode entirely devoted to him and his dealing with the apocalypse. And it does tie into the main part of the show, but that isn't the point. If you haven't seen it already, it's truly one of the best, probably, video game changes for an adaptation that I've seen. And it's so tasteful and well thought out, and it was just such a nice treat to see in a show like this, especially if you know the kind of things that people harp on video game changes for, the kinds of inclusion issues that you have. I think it was truly great. And that does bring me to what I hope for Season 2. I know that when Last of Us Part 2 came out, there was a lot of stink for certain plot choices, which I don't really agree with hating on for. I think you can play the game the way that it is, regardless of what kind of turns the writing takes. And I truly hope that people who hated on certain characters either find a new way to love them through the second season, or just enjoy the show for what it is, because I think all the hate that Last of Us Season 2 had gotten over its entire release, what was it, like 2019, 2020, I think that was totally undeserved. Last of Us 2, the game, is a much better, enhanced version of the first game. I mean, gameplay-wise, it's just intensely better, and the story takes so many deeper turns and has so many much more kind of underlying topics for revenge, or what's really worth all this carnage in the end. If you haven't played the game, you should try and do that, or hopefully you'll avoid spoilers before season 2 comes out, where at the very least I do hope that the returning actors Pedro Pascal and the woman who plays Ellie, the young woman who plays Ellie, I think that it'd be cool to see them age a little bit and then have the show jump off there, kind of like it does in the show. I can totally understand that they're going to get a new actress for that, even though I think she stated she'd like to stay on, which is cool, really cool. And one of the small things I liked about it is that the show also references small things about the video game. I don't remember if they ever mentioned Ellie not being able to swim in the show. I think they do, but something I liked about it was a decently used video game mechanic in it was the fact that you had to pull down these ladders and use them to get Ellie across big, giant gaps of areas or ledges and stuff. And there's a small scene where Ellie gets hoisted up by Joel and lets the ladder go, and Ellie has to use the ladder to bring up Joel, and that was pretty cool. I like to see a few video game adaptations reference the game mechanics in some way. I always like that. I know even like the Max Payne movies did things like that, where they added slow motion in that, kind of like when he does his pill stuff. Little moments like that are really cool. I would have liked them to have a little more of that. They do have one where Ellie uses a shiv on a clicker. It's one of the only times you see a clicker die through melee combat. Lore-wise in the game, that totally makes sense. Like close combat or close quarters, taking on a clicker is relatively hard. I think in game terms, they talk about how like the fungus acts like a partial armor for the infected, so getting any like damage to them is pretty difficult. But I do like that the small game mechanics do play into the overall plot, even in small ways. They nod at it to some degree. Now, Naughty Dog has also confirmed that they're working on their next title, which they have confirmed to at least not be Last of Us Part 3, which I don't mind. I probably imagine they're going to wait for Last of Us Part 3 for the TV show to kick off. That's probably when we're most likely going to see it. For those of you who don't know, Naughty Dog has made several hit games, such as Uncharted and I believe Ratchet & Clank games that I just started playing not too long ago for the first time. That series is truly amazing. And I think that this is one of the better adaptations for any media of video game out there. I mean, you have so many versions of video games being turned into usually movies of some sort or games with the spin-offs or TV shows, and they've always been hit or miss. I think we all remember the Assassin's Creed movie that just completely butchered whatever concept of Assassin's Creed we even had from the first few games. However, we're getting one of the most beloved video game characters and franchises back on the big screen. The Mario movie that comes out, I think April or June, is sometime in that kind of area, but I'm ecstatic for that. It looks great. I know a lot of people aren't so thrilled about the casting, but I think that if they do a good job with the voices in terms of dialogue for getting a movie together, I don't mind some of the voices being a little wonky. I mean, we're talking about a giant turtle man who breathes fire, and then like ghosts and stuff. Not every voice has to be hit or miss. These characters have been voiced for years or ever for some things. And it is a shame that an actor for the Mario character himself wouldn't be reprising the movie. That is a shame. But it is what it is. I'm still excited to see it, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Now let's get into the meat of today's episode. AMC and Freely Publishing have partnered together to deliver us a Walking Dead universe role-playing game. Set within the Walking Dead universe itself, you will play as characters that you create yourself, or play as pre-generated fan-favorite characters from the franchise and play in your own universe of The Walking Dead. Truly, for me, this is one of the biggest announcements that I could have had as a Walking Dead fan and a tabletop fan. I've been wanting something like this forever. I'm sure that there's other zombie kind of apocalypse tabletop games out there, but The Walking Dead is a little more specific. It's its own thing. It's a fan favorite thing from decades ago. I mean, the comics came out, I feel like, 20 years now. and the show is just ended. The main show has just finished its 11th season run, so that's a decade right there. I mean, this is a franchise that you would think zombies would be kind of in the wayside now. I mean, we're getting things like Dead Island 2, which is another kind of surprise that we're still getting. Dying Light just came out. I feel like the whole stigma for zombies has just kind of waned in the last few years and so, but it's really good to see that this is kicking hard again. And I can tell you that I already backed this Kickstarter up. With 16 days to go, I've plugged in my pledge, and I am so excited to get this. For anybody who wants to get in on this game or check it out, there's going to be a link to the Kickstarter attached to the episode. And if you do back it within a month or so, a few weeks after the pledge or the Kickstarter ends, those backers will get PDF versions of whatever they subscribe to, as well as the stretch goals and everything like that. Now, I've been a huge fan of this franchise since I started watching the show when it came out. I remember, I think it started in maybe 2008 or so, watching it with my family every Sunday for the first few seasons until I went off to college and started watching it myself. And since then, I've been watching it on and off for when I can, and I finally just caught up to the very finale of Series 1, The Walking Dead, and that compared to the show, or that's compared to the comics, I think they're both phenomenal. I read the comics on and off for every couple years. I have all 4 compendiums, plus I think the Negan Kills spin-off comic. Truly phenomenal franchise. Even played the Telltale Walking Dead games, all 3 seasons and their spin-offs. Obviously, big fan. And I've been dying to make a game like this. Probably after my Mutants Masterminds Marvel game ends, I'll be doing Walking Dead with my friends. Maybe we'll do a Chicago kind of area set piece for it. I haven't really decided. This isn't my first Kickstarter that I've backed. I've backed the Avatar: The Last Airbender Kickstarter, which I just received a few months ago. Also phenomenal. If you haven't checked it out, highly recommend you do for Avatar fans. And I'm still waiting on the Mothership and the Batman tabletop RPGs to start coming out my way. Those will be pretty good. Now, in terms of this Kickstarter, you're looking at your standard fluff for any RPG. You're going to get your core book, which is going to have your rules, your lore, most likely your character creation and items, and then things like that. You also get a starter set, which typically comes with a reduced version of the core book, mostly just rules and character creation, things to get combat and the game flowing, as well as dice and maps and other kind of accessories that you can do for running your game. Stretch goals are vary to just more content that you can get for the book itself, but I did catch the DM screen, which is going to be very helpful. Again, really excited to be a part of this Kickstarter and trying to get this game into my hands, because I have been waiting for something like this. I think it's just perfect that they announced this Kickstarter right when I finished the Walking Dead show. So I'm probably going to try and get up onto catch up on Fear the Walking Dead and New World Order or whatever at some point. Now, Free League is a company that I've been a fan of for quite a long time. They make very well made and fun tabletop games compared to some of the other things that be out there. Their games are on a 2d6 kind of system. You roll d6s instead of d20s or any kind of die for this game, and that system that they have with stress and panic that they used for Alien in their Alien RPG is so much fun. I mean, every kind of decision, success or fail, usually has some kind of consequences in that game. So that's been a lot of fun to run. They even have a Blade Runner series of games, which just started coming out. I got the rulebook for that. Excited to run that at some point. For the future, Free League has even announced that they're going to be putting out more content for their supplements. They announced that there's going to be a Colonist supplement book for the Alien game, as well as some type of new cinematic campaign, which I'm excited for. I even picked up Heart of Darkness, which was their kind of spin-off starter set box thing that they did for Alien. I haven't played it yet, but it does look gorgeous. And they even announced that there's going to be a new Blade Runner case files for the Blade Runner RPG. I think case files are like mini scenarios for your Blade Runner to go investigate. That's extremely fun. Now, the Walking Dead Kickstarter has been fully funded out of far beyond its goal of $23,000. It's now just reached a little under $450,000, which is amazing. A pure 1,000% increase from what they were trying to pledge to, or the goal was. And it's very good to see that they reached that, because that just means that this game's going to truly be put out, hopefully in our hands sometime soon. Outside of the PDFs that will be attributed, hopefully a month after the game ends, or the Kickstarter ends, everybody should be able to get their Kickstarter pledges and buy the content by fall, I believe. Obviously, these things take time to produce and make, so time varies for all these projects. But I trust AMC and Free League to get this done. I know a lot of people have been saying that Free League has kind of taken on too many projects lately, and well, that may be true. I think that they have shown that they can deliver. Maybe not on time, I can't say that personally, but definitely quantity. I've backed their Blade Runner Kickstarter, and that was really good. I got that on time, happy about that, and I'm very hopeful for the Walking Dead Kickstarter. This game is going to be one of my most anticipated tabletop games that could be coming out within the next few years, and it's probably the top of my list to run right now in the future. Now let's talk about what I've been doing this week, and one of the things I did was I went and saw Scream 6 with my girlfriend and a friend of mine in theaters, and that was a phenomenal horror movie. In terms of a Scream sequel, I think it hit all the points that you need to hit for a Scream sequel. It was mysterious, it was a little scary at times, it was funny, and it was meta. It had all the things that I think encompass a Scream movie in its own right, except for probably one thing, and that's actress and her character missing from the movie. I won't say who it is if you haven't seen it yet, but that's probably the biggest letdown of the franchise, is that it's called Scream 6 and this person wasn't in it. It's not that big a deal, but it's definitely something that was I was looking forward to, and not having that was a little bit of a letdown. But as a huge fan of Scream, who loves all of these movies since he was a kid, and I still watch them multiple times every year, even the TV shows, which I think are okay. Seasons 1 and 2 are pretty mid, but 3 has a nice mystery, even with its really bad ending, in my opinion. But while watching Scream 6, it was still fun trying to figure out who the villain was, which you never really get with these other kinds of movies or franchises, at least now. Everybody knows that, Freddy Krueger is Freddy Krueger, or Jason Voorhees is Voorhees. Never really trying to figure out who these guys are in their adaptations or their movies. But with Scream, it's a different villain or villains every single time. It's different every single new installment, which they have to keep changing and adding all kinds of new pieces to the lore and understandings and perspectives to everyone. I mean, Scream 6 does the Charlie from Sunny in Philadelphia kind of red line billboard thing with who's connected this guy in the mystery, or who was here during this movie, right? That kind of thing. It references all 5 movies in really good fashion, but I think is probably the best thing you could do for a movie franchise with such great legacy, is that you acknowledge that these films came out so long ago and are actually integral to the plot that you need to reference them in some way. You need to have some kind of connection, or show that they're still kind of involved in the overall plot, because these are villains that are here for mostly revenge or some kind of odd pettiness. The second movie, we had the guy's mom be a killer with some online boyfriend. They're silly and they're dumb, and I love them to death. Scream 6 is an absolute 10 out of 10 horror movie from start to finish. If you've seen Screams 1 through 5, you have to see this one. It's just as good as the 5 that came before it. And I'm ecstatic to see 7. Even if 7's fully dog shit, I still want to see it. Now, one of the best things about it was probably trying to figure out who the villain was, but also the meta. It shows that horror movies haven't changed all that much, but the way that you have to make them have changed. They're not as different in ways that you would find the original ones. They comment on the rules of horror movies. Ooh, don't go here alone. Don't have sex. They play into that, but they also make it fun, and they play on the meta with how instead of being a part of a sequel or a trilogy, they talk about like this is part of a franchise now, and it's just kind of a self-indulging circle with this kind of franchise. I love it. Each character in it feels like their own kind of person. They're not stupid, you know, especially with the new setting that you would find with Scream 6. A villain in the city you find is even just as menacing as a killer terrorizing some stranded house in the boondocks in California, like the originals. Truly a horror movie that has to be seen for fans who love the Scream franchise. I'm also currently playing Wulong Fallen Dynasty still. I just recently finished beating the Tao boss, some big monstrous homunculus baby man thing, and I'm going through what I think is the final area of the game, the last battlefield of the game, Tyrant's Final Banquet. And this is a game that keeps on giving. I thought I was probably almost done with it maybe 10 and 20 hours ago, but it keeps introducing more and more areas to explore and bosses to fight, which is amazing. I hope this game gets DLC. I would love to play it again at some point. And I'm going to try and do what I can before I finish it and Resident Evil 4 comes out, which should be next week. So with that, I'm going to try and beat Wulong and Metroid Prime before Resident Evil comes out. Metroid Prime, I just gotten the Ice Beam, and I'm just kind of slowly moving towards that game. For what I'm reading right now, I'm still going through Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I'm about 200 pages in, and every time I read this book, it's such an easy read to get through. I mean, the pacing is so easy to digest that you can kind of just understand what's happening throughout the book from start to finish. And you kind of just breeze through it like a regular TV show you've already seen once before. But the Creed family and the way that the family conducts themselves with their little moments is really sweet. Especially when you find out like it all just kind of breaks down towards the end. I think the Creed family is probably the most well-knit family King's ever written. I personally never understood why the book kind of starts out with talking about Judd being a kind of stand-in father figure for the father of the family. That's more so probably me just not understanding the theme or the dynamic, but I remember that being a preference that they talk about in the beginning of the book. But probably the best thing to see is that the underlying concept of death and dying and what happens like beyond that kind of aspect of life is truly something different for this book, because you have a family of characters have such a different viewpoint of death and dying. You have the father who's like a medical doctor. Obviously his view on death and dying is a lot more natural, and it should be embraced and accepted rather than kind of feared, which is the very opposite of his wife. His wife is absolutely the antithesis of fearing death. I mean, her entire backstory of how her sister had some disease, and that traumatized her family and herself, even to when the book starts taking place. Events like that still take place in her mind, and she has an absolute fear of death, so far as where her and her husband have arguments over how death should be handled with their kids, and when the pets start dying, and it just kind of crumbles from there. Obviously, if you are a fan of King or horror novels in general, give Pet Sematary a read. It's his best book so far, at least like back when he used to write more horror. Right now he probably writes a little more mystery thriller, which isn't for everybody. I don't mind his newer books, but I think Pet Sematary is probably the easiest horror novel of his for anybody to read. And last but not least, something that I did want to talk about was the Gotham Knights TV show that started to come out. I don't plan on watching it, but I do think it's interesting. I know a lot of people have their reservations on CW-produced superhero shows. And while I can't say that Gotham Knights look particularly interesting to me, I think it's fascinating that this show got greenlit and made or announced around the same time the Gotham Knights game was being made and shown off. And Gotham Knights game came out a few months ago, and the show just started up recently. But since we're talking about adaptations or kind of how you work same titles from like games or comics into TV shows, we talked about that with The Walking Dead, with how I think the game and the TV show are two great pinnacles of each other's respective media. Last of Us is a really good game in terms of storytelling and gameplay. I think the show does a lot more with the storytelling and everything else. But the Gotham Knights show doesn't tie into the game at all, which I think is also baffling. But the game is also just so not good that I think that definitely entered or brought a sour taste to not Batman or Batman spin-offs, but specifically Gotham Knights content. I think it was definitely not a good call to put out Gotham Knights the game and then a bad version of a TV show like that. I definitely don't know what kind of correlation was happening between DC or CW, but if you've seen Gotham Knights, the TV show, please put in the comments that you've seen it and what you think of it. I want to give it at least a try. I tried watching, the last CW show I tried watching was Batwoman, and that was really difficult, but I want to give it a try at least once. I did play through Gotham Knights. I did co-op with a friend. That's probably the best way you could experience that show, or that game, is through co-op, where you're at least having fun beating up spongy enemies and dealing with shitty fast-traveling nonsense with a friend, rather than just by yourself and wasting your own time. That would have to be the best way to play the game. But yeah, that probably brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you for listening, everyone who stayed by until the end. I will be here for episode 3. You could find us on Twitter, Spotify, Amazon, Deezer, Podcast Addict, and YouTube.